Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Just getting all of the different buttons pressed, making sure you can all hear me. See some thumbs up out there. Excellent. This is Thursdays with Friends. This is our online conversation on current issues. In just 6 weeks, negotiators and climate experts will gather in Glasgow for a conference aimed at accelerating action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. This is perhaps the most important climate conference this year, as the impact of climate change on people here and abroad continues to worsen. I'm the show's producer, Leslie Wolfberg-Pinkham. Here's our chat host for Thursdays with Friends, FCNL General Secretary Diane Randall, and her guest, Clarence Edwards, FCNL's top lobbyist on sustainable energy and the environment.
Thank you, Wesley, and welcome everyone. Great to be with you this afternoon on our Thursdays with Friends. It's always fun to have this gathering, even as we discuss these very serious topics, and today is no different. I want to welcome those of you on Zoom. We also have people joining us on Facebook Live and on YouTube. So just to note that I think we have a pretty good showing for this issue, which I know concerns many people greatly. We have seen some pretty significant reports. We have seen some rather terrifying and accelerating climate events that certifies in no uncertain terms the challenge we have before us. We are in a week at our 20th anniversary of 9/11, when we are doing a lot of review of our own national security and global security. And I can think of no better issue, honestly, to bring before us right now than the global imperative of addressing climate change. Right now, and I'm thrilled that Clarence Edwards, our lobbyist on energy and environment, is joining us today to tell us exactly what's happening on Capitol Hill right now, because there is a lot happening for a change, and we're excited about it. We have been talking to you a lot about the reconciliation bill, and Clarence is here today to talk to us a lot about what's happening in that reconciliation bill with regard to key elements of the President Biden's climate agenda. I think many of you know Clarence from having joined some of the conversations that he hosts. You've read some of the work that he's produced for FCNL. He is our lead lobbyist on sustainable energy and environment. Clarence joined FCNL last year, and before that, he had been working at the Australian Embassy, where he provided advice on strategies to engage Congress and the executive branch. As a lobbyist and advocate, he's also represented the interests of international development nonprofits. His Quaker background is graduating from Baltimore Friends School, and he's also studied economic development at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Clarence, we want to know what's happening on Capitol Hill, and we also want to get to environmental justice. So without further ado, let me welcome you and say how thrilled I am to be talking with you today.
Thank you, Diane. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Great. Thank you very much for that, Diane. I'm excited to talk to you and talk to everyone today. It looks like we have 127 participants. No pressure there. And thank you to all of FCNL's donors and supporters who make our work here in Washington, D.C. possible. Really grateful for you and appreciate your support. Since I joined you back in February, Diane, the Congress has, well, what makes this so exciting is that the Congress is literally at this moment beginning its work on the president's climate agenda. The House Energy and Commerce Committee has released some of the details, maybe about a half hour ago, of what they're looking to put in what we've been talking about as this $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation. I like the term Build Back Better Act so much better, because it's a lot better than trying to say budget reconciliation multiple times and then explain what it is. So we are faced with the greatest opportunity. It's no exaggeration to say that what's happening should this legislation pass, will be the largest federal program series of federal programs since the New Deal. So that's what makes this a really exciting time. And we will have an opportunity. This is the best opportunity in decades to get on the path to a sustainable, low carbon economy that has opportunity for everyone. So before,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I just love the fact that you're doing this outside, Clarence. I wish I were outside with you as much as I love being in FCNL's LEED certified building, but it's great to have you in the outdoors.
It's fun to work on climate issues surrounded by Mother Nature, because it's always a reminder to me of what we're trying to do at FCNL. It's about passing legislation, but it's also about, what do we say? We seek an earth restored. Being around that earth and close to it is motivational for me. So yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what is in this Build Back Better plan, because people who have participated in FCNL's Thursdays with Friends and who participate in following us on everything we're doing know that we've talked about this reconciliation bill or the Build Back Better plan in terms of some of the programs it has on economic justice, for example, on the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit, which we are also following very closely and excited about. And that's one of the reasons why this is such a mega project. And to your point about this is generational change, transformational change. But there are some new initiatives that honestly that I had not heard of. And in talking to you, you helped clarify with me about the clean electricity payment program and the clean energy tax incentives in the budget reconciliation bill. Tell us about what those are. Washington, D.C. is famous for acronyms. So tell us what these are and how they actually reduce carbon.
And you're absolutely right. And thank you for that question, Barbara. I'm going to mention carbon pricing because we haven't forgotten that. But I wanted to start out with giving you some background. As Diane mentioned, the Clean Electricity Payment Program is one of the key. Senator Schumer came out about a week ago and said there are two programs that are central to our climate efforts and climate legislation. One was the Clean Electricity Payment Program, and the other one, as Diane said, is the Clean Energy Tax Credits. The Clean Electricity Payment Program provides payments to utilities that meet targets of selling increased shares of clean power. It's technology neutral, but it's focused on helping utilities, providing payments to utilities essentially to encourage them to use more solar, wind, geothermal, hydropower in their energy mix. And the upside is that the more of these renewable technologies and energy sources that they use, the greater their payments. And the downside for utilities is if they don't use or they don't increase their clean energy mix, then they're hit with fines and penalties. So this is a way, and it's designed in a way to help this particular piece of legislation get through budget reconciliation. So in that way, it's the federal government's effort to nudge the utility sector, the power sector, to use more clean energy. And so it works with the goal. The goal of this program is working to ensure that 80% of the electricity generated comes from zero carbon sources by 2030. One of the other aspects is, as I mentioned, clean energy tax credits. And these would provide long-term incentives for solar, wind, and other renewable technologies that will make energy storage and high transmission eligible for investment tax credits. And that's important because transmission and the electrical grid, not to get too deep into the weeds, but the electric grid in the US is fundamental to building out a low carbon economy, and improving that grid is vitally important. And it also has tax credits and tax incentives for commercial and residential energy efficiency. energy efficiency being one of the leading areas where you can reduce energy use and waste. And so these two initiatives, the Clean Electricity Payment Program and Clean Energy Tax Credits, work synergistically with each other to help drive down carbon emissions and to help build out the renewable energy sector, which is still growing, but still needs help, particularly as it faces a fossil fuel industry that still gets enormous subsidies from the federal government. Let me just add that the third leg of this triad, in my mind, is carbon pricing. And I will share with you that carbon pricing has been fairly quiet over the past few months. But there are efforts going on quietly and quote unquote behind the scenes to get a carbon price included in reconciliation in the Build Back Better Act. And FCNL, which has been a longtime supporter of carbon pricing, is continuing to support those efforts.
Thank you for saying that, because I do know we have a lot of, we have worked, as you know, Clarence, with you and before you came to FCNL, doing a lot of work on carbon pricing initiatives. And so we're thrilled to hear that you're still working on this. And I want to talk a little bit about that more. And I want to talk about that in relation to environmental justice as well when we get to that. But we're getting lots of questions, as I knew we would. But one of them was actually a question I asked you yesterday when we were preparing for this. And that question is, what about the existing subsidies that fossil fuel companies get? Are we also seeing some impetus to try to reduce those subsidies in lieu of trying to stimulate the green energy?
Efforts, we support those efforts more low key than our primary goal of moving the CEPP and tax credits and carbon pricing. But FCNL and in our advocacy, we are very supportive of efforts to eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. There's, in my mind, and I worked at the Department of Energy for a year, and I worked with the Office of Fossil Energy on their appropriations. And there's an every year attempt that is ramped up this year with the climate legislation to eliminate these subsidies. There's no reason why this multi-billion-dollar industry that is really harming our health needs to be subsidized by the federal government anymore. So there are efforts going on to reduce those subsidies, and we support those efforts.
Thanks. So let's turn and talk a little bit about environmental justice now, because you've also put a new and renewed focus on this. And I will just note that our advocacy core, which is the group of young adults who are around the country, are organizing on environmental justice this year. And so some of them may be making connections with people who are on this call and in their work. But the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, recently had an analysis that said the most severe harms from climate change fall disproportionately on underserved communities who are least able to prepare for and recover from heat waves, poor air quality, flooding, and other impacts. And this is something that we've known, but having this new analysis, I think, just underscores the demand for addressing this. And again, we don't have to look any farther than even the nightly news to see what's happened. If you look at Hurricane Ida and the impact in the New Jersey, New York corridor. So tell us a little bit about what's happening in the advocacy community with regard to environmental justice in relation to what else we're working on.
Well, environmental justice, and I'm glad you mentioned Ida. And, I think about people of all socioeconomic backgrounds have to flee from the Western fires and so forth. But people that have the biggest challenges when their lives are uprooted are people who don't have access to enough resources. And environmental justice, it's been exciting to see it gain more traction just in my time at FCNL. What we're doing, FCNL is working with other faith-based organizations and, frankly, renewable energy companies who are increasingly interested in the social justice angle, and a diverse group of stakeholders we're supporting efforts to, number one, put more money into the congressional appropriations for the Environmental Protection Agency, so that the EPA has grant resources and also has enforcement capability to enforce EJ laws. So there's a significant increase in funding for the EPA's Office of Environmental Justice in the fiscal year 22 EPA budget. So that's one area we're pushing. Secondly, the Environmental Justice for All Act. As Diane mentioned, we have advocates around the country who we've trained in talking about the EJ for All Act, and they're fanning out and they're doing a lot of work on the ground across the US to help educate people in communities about EJ. So we're strong supporters of the EJ for All Act. In terms of the legislation that I was talking about previously with the CEPP, something that's really important to note is a study that came out a few months ago from Harvard University and Syracuse. And they said that the CEPP or other clean electricity standards, and I'm reading this, by an 80% by 2030 clean electricity program would save an estimated 317,000 lives in the US over the next 30 years because of a significant reduction in air pollution. Black Americans would see the biggest air quality improvements since they are often exposed to more pollution from living near highways and power plants. And so one of the things that I like about the CEPP is that it, in addition to helping to build out a low carbon economy, it has the not insignificant knock-on effect of helping to reduce air pollution in the communities that experience it the most. And so those are some of the initiatives that are going on. The last one I'll mention is something that is very interesting to me, and because it's has to do with highways. There are a lot of highways in cities across the U.S. that were built through minority communities in the 50s and 60s, and very happy that there's $1 billion. It should be more, but maybe we can do that in the future. There's $1 billion in the infrastructure bill for highway removal to help stitch these communities back together. It's happened in Baltimore when I was growing up. Former Senator Barbara Mikulski, who was a friend of my mother and father's, worked to keep I-95 from being built right through Fells Point and destroying historic ethnic Greek, Polish, German, Italian, and African-American neighborhoods. So this is all part of environmental justice, stitching communities back together, reducing the impact of pollution on all of us, but on particularly those who've suffered from the burden the most in the past. So there's a lot of exciting advocacy and exciting policies going on around environmental justice.
Indeed. And in fact, as we look at the challenges of systemic racism within many federal policies, we also see the implementation of this at the local level by these decisions that have been made about where plants are located or how highways are built or how communities are divided. And so the fact that that is also getting attention, in the Biden administration is really heartening. And I just need to say that, we are going to work extremely hard to get these provisions included in the Build Back Better plan. And we know that it is not sufficient to address the massive problems that we have with regard to restoring our earth. And so I want to be clear about that because people are asking a lot of questions about the various things that might be done to address water there are all kinds of ways that this could go. But right now we are focused on what is moving in Congress, and what is moving in Congress is the Build Back Better plan. And it is really encouraging to see that we have leadership in the White House that will try to continue to push for at least some new and significant investments. And we want you to take action with us. And so that's why you're seeing up on your screen right now where you can go to the FCNL website to take action. There are a couple of different action alerts, but the one that we're focusing on right now is the one that is immediately moving with that big Build Back Better plan. So I want to just make sure that we highlight that. Clarence, do you want to just mention, I know that you and I have both been involved in some conversations around carbon tax and with the environmental justice community, and particularly how, because somebody asked that, Chris asked this question about how can the issue of a carbon tax ensure that it deals equitably. Do you want to say anything about that with regard to how we are engaged, and specifically how you are engaged in continuing to be in dialogue with those with the community that is advocating for a carbon tax, and how we're prioritizing what has to happen to assure that people who come from marginalized communities are protected if should this go forward?
Absolutely. We all know that FCNL has worked for years on carbon pricing and a carbon tax. And as Diane makes the very good point, there's a real challenge there because the environmental justice community, not all of it, but a significant portion of the EJ community is really suspicious of and doubtful about the efficacy of carbon pricing. There is not a lot of trust that carbon pricing is going to work for those communities, even with the rebate. Even with funds going back to people in low income and minority communities. The EJ community, and like I said, it's not the entire community, but there's a suspicion of whether this is going to work. What FCNL is doing and what I'm doing, there are a couple of things. I'm working with the Pricing Carbon Initiative, and I am working on the steering committee there. One of the goals I have while I'm engaged with that group is to build a bridge between the EJ community and the carbon pricing advocates, and really do a lot of listening about what the real concerns are, and see whether we can have a new dialogue and a new conversation around carbon pricing, because I think we can square that circle. But it takes fostering and nurturing a new dialogue. So that's something that I'm actively working on there, because we can't have effective carbon pricing if a significant part of the population either doesn't trust it or feels like it is a solution that is imposed upon them. And so with that, we remain engaged on carbon pricing, but we just want to approach it in a way that works for as many people as possible.
Thank you for that. So I do know that we've had a couple of other questions. Specifically, there was a question about the pipelines that are going forward. I don't know if I don't think FCNL is doing a lot on that right now, although we know that there are a lot of Quakers that are very active on that. And Shelley Tannenbaum, our friend from Quaker Earth Care Witness, was asking us about there's evidently going to be direct action at the White House, which again, I don't think we're directly involved with, but we know that a lot of our Quaker friends are involved with. So I don't know if you've been in dialogue about either of those that you want to remark on those questions or comments.
Haven't been involved with the direction action at the White House, but we do support it. I will say, whether it's one of the fascinating yet very challenging aspects of climate policy is there are so many different issues for us to focus on if we choose to. There's water, there are pipelines, there's clean air, there's heat, the wildfires, there's a heat coalition. There are a lot of different avenues. And there's part of me that wants to jump into as many of them as possible. But what we're trying to do with our advocacy is find the highest impact, most transformational policies and put our efforts and energies behind those. Because if we make changes in certain particular areas, we can cascade a series of other changes. And while these other issues are equally as important, and they're all important, but we feel in our advocacy that if we can not target, it's not the right word, but if we can identify those areas where we can help advocate for transformational change, that's going to unlock a whole series of other changes. And so that's how I look at our lobbying and advocacy on energy and environmental issues. We want to go for the most effective policies to have the biggest chance of making the greatest change.
Thanks, Clarence. It's true on almost every, I would say on every issue we work on, we try to stay very focused on vehicles that are moving in Congress. And we know that as we started off this conversation, that this is a global problem with a high need for US change. I mean, there is no question that the United States needs to provide dramatic leadership to make changes, but it is a global problem, and we will continue to use our influence as we can and continue to ask our network to use their influence with their own members of Congress to advance this. I do want to put a plug in for Inside the Greenhouse. We have a specific newsletter that goes out once a month that gives both action alerts and updates of the work that FCNL is doing here on the Hill. And if you are not currently subscribed to it, it's a digital newsletter. You don't have to worry about any kind of carbon footprint with this. So we hope that you'll sign up to get information about what's going on more directly, in addition to staying in tune with what's on our website and staying involved. Clarence, we're at the end of time already. I think that we probably could talk for several hours about all this work because you have the knowledge, and we have people on this call who are sharing chat in the chat and have ideas. And so it's a very vital and alive conversation for people who are part of the FCNL network. And my hope is that, we will be able to continue to really lean in and do more and more as we go forward. But just want to ask you if you have any final closing remarks as we finish today.
Thank you very much, Diane. And it's a really exciting time. The changes that a lot of us have been advocating for longer than I have, a lot of you have been advocating for, they're right over the horizon. And we will need your voices as well. This isn't just about me or my new colleague, Rosalie, our new young fellow, who hopefully many of you all will get to meet soon. This isn't just about us going to Capitol Hill or talking to policymakers one-on-one or working coalitions. We need your help. We need your voice and your support. And I intend to be in touch with as many of you as possible over the coming weeks, because your voice is the voice that will push this over the line. So I'm really excited about this year, and I'm excited about working with you all going forward.
We're glad you're with us, Clarence, on leading this work. It's been a real blessing for our organization and for the network here. I want to also say thank you to everyone who's joined this call. Many of you are donors to FCNL that allow this work to go forward. And many of you have voice in your local community on this issue and in a whole range of direct action or protests or letters to the editor. This is an issue that will take, it's a lifetime generation issue to work on. And so all of these means of keeping this issue in front of us, not just the crises that we're facing from climate change, but the voices of people who say there's a way that we can address this. And it has to happen now. And it is happening now. So thank you so much for being with us today, Clarence, and all of you for joining the call. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. And I'm just thrilled to tell you that Portia, our Native American fellow, who works on our Native American advocacy program, is going to be speaking then, and you'll get an update of what's happening with our alliance work on Native American issues. I'm excited about that as well. So thank you again for joining us today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everyone.